the fascist state is always about emphasizing two sets of rules. Now, we see this in our courts, we see it with our police, with our politicians, with our government, with our political prisoners across the nation. We see it in particular in what seems like the small things, but are not small at all. For example, in Washington with the unmarked car issue, the police in Washington and in many other states are rampantly using unmarked cars so they can extort you on the side of the road by hiding in corners and in minivans and in unmarked vehicles, saying it's for your safety, and then saying, well, look, we can get more revenue that way. And they unabashedly will pretend that it's about protecting your children, even though they're putting your children at risk. Because when they use an unmarked car, it makes impersonating an officer as easy as putting a red and blue flashing cell phone in your window, and any of your daughters will stop any time of the day or night. Now, that's why a lot of you video, this is where I pulled over a police officer for this in Washington. Now, not all states have this statute for government. They should, but in Washington, it's implicitly illegal for them to use unmarked cars.
Afternoon, sir. Good. Hey, the reason I stopped you today is because I saw this car was unmarked. Is this a registered unmarked vehicle for undercover work, or?
Now, pulling over a police officer that anyone can do. I mean, you wave them down, you pull them over. You can go watch this video, and you can also read my legal brief about dealing with this. And I've stopped multiple officers, which caused a big conversation. Here's what's happening in Washington now. The police are mad because so many people have called them out for using unmarked cars, and it's costing them revenue. I mean, you got moms in minivans saying, hey, why are you stopping me in an unmarked car? So now they're going to excuse mode. The law is very clear. The law says their cars must be marked. The law says the only exemption is for undercover and investigative vehicles. This is not patrol vehicles. These are specific designated undercover issues, okay? So the law is very clear. In fact, if you go to my legal brief on this, if you search for Gavin Seim, unmarked police car stop, there's a blog post about this where we go back to the intent of the law, even back to when it was made, and legal notes from the last time it was modified by the state legislature, and it makes it very clear this law is to make sure police cars have to be marked when they're stopping people. Now we go to, and here's this news article on crime in Spokane, and what it is it's just a piece pretending to be news. This is what we call news selling out to government for propaganda. All this is propaganda. It's a bunch of officers telling you they can break the law. And then the news narrative is saying, well, the reason they can do this is because of this exemption or because it's written this way. Well, they have no idea what they're talking about. The way the law is written is very clear. What they're doing is they're just lackeys for corrupt government. And so here we go. Look at this.
Cars are allowed to be unmarked.
Yes, unmarked cars can pull over speeders. I know this gets raised a lot.
A lot of confusion has to do with how the law is written. The law states it is unlawful for any public officer to have charge of any vehicle owned or controlled by any county, city, or town or public body until it has markings on it. However, the law goes on to say that the rule...
So here's this law. They're saying the law, and it's saying exactly what it says. They're quoting the law saying, well, the law says that they must be marked, right? But the law says that local officers and police departments and sheriffs don't have to be marked. No, that's not what it says at all. It says they don't have to be marked if they're for special undercover or investigative. So here you have news media. You have Krem selling out to the police because the police are losing money. And if you watch this video they just posted on Krem News, these police, the whole video is essentially not even news. It's just police telling you they can do what they want. Police saying, oh yes, we can use unmarked cars. And then another officer says, yes, we can do this because it protects you, right? It's not a revenue scheme, they say. You know when the police are on there defending, because everyone knows, you all know, that it's a revenue scheme. We all know it is a revenue scheme when police hide in corners and unmarked cars saying they're protecting you. Well, we're looking to get those aggressive drivers that might otherwise slow down if they saw us. Wait, what? Isn't the idea that people are reminded? Isn't the idea that people are aware and slowing down and being careful and watching for children, right? Not to the police. See, to our police in America, there's two sets of rules. This is called fascism, and here's one instance of it. In fascism, the government, the haves, the have-nots, right? You have the elites, different levels of elites, of course, because, you know, the police are lackeys to some of the people above them, but we're supposed to be lackeys to them. So first of all, you have the politicians, the power people in a fascist state, right? And they have authority. They have absolute authority. And it's promoted by nationalism. They get the underlings to support this by pretending it's patriotic and that it protects people. So this is rampant in America, which is fully a fascist state now. Your civil rights are ignored by the courts. Your due process is ignored by the courts. The police can kill you. The government can lock you away in prison. And they can break any law they want. And so think about this. You live in a society where if you make the slightest error, you will be punished to the fullest extent that the government can get away with, which is pretty much your life if they want it to be at this point. But the heroic officer who's out breaking the law, right? He has no accountability whatsoever. We're supposed to bow down and worship him because he's the officer and he's a hero and he's putting himself at risk for us, or they're the government, or look what they're doing, they're protecting the children. So here you have the absurdity of a government who demands, of a court who demands that we allow people to be murdered by government, that we allow babies to be murdered by the millions in our nation, and they have the gall to come out and say, we just want to protect you and your children, and that's why we're breaking the law, and that's why we're not protecting your rights. It's a complete sham. See, I've talked to good police officers, folks. They've either quit or they've been fired. The reason no police officers are standing up in America is because they have groomed the new generation of police officers and brainwashed the other generation, or fired them, to make sure they do what the state wants, to make sure they will be federal officers when the feds want them to make sure they will comply with the system. See, it's not simply about unmarked cars putting your daughters at risk on the road because they'll stop any time of the day or night. It's just one example of the fascism in America. So if you're in Washington, don't let them give you this stuff. If you see the unmarked car stopping people, then pull up and say, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing? Why are you breaking the law? Why are you endangering people? Quit letting them use the fascist lines of nationalism and state worship. Start getting back to God worship. Because God worship leads you to say, oh, I love my neighbor. I want to protect their rights. If you want to worship, worship God. If you don't agree with me on that, fine, but don't worship the state. This worship of the state and the uniform and the police and the blue line, it's hypocrisy. It's idolatry. It's fascism. To honor these guys, these crooks that are out there just taking advantage and ripping people off and endangering our children, it's now no longer just a collection scheme. Okay? It's no longer just a collection scheme, guys. It's now actually endangering your family. And these same people who say they can break the law, this is how they interpret it. The intent of the law as it was written is irrelevant. They can do whatever they want. We're falling for anything they tell us. It's not about hating officers. I want these officers to repent. I want them to come over and start defending the law. And when they do, I'll be standing there beside them. But this is not liberty. This is not freedom. This is fascism. And it's time to start standing up to it. All right, you guys have a good day. Take care. And you can find that video, callmegav.com is where you can find my blog post on that.